Welcome to the Property Nomads Podcast. Welcome to travel. Welcome to Brazil. I'm going to try and not cry with laughter when we get to the story about the toucan in the aviary, I think is what we call them, in Foz do Iguaçu. It still remains one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen in my life. A bit harsh, but yeah, just thinking about it now. We'll get there. But we just left Curitiba. We're heading down to Florianopolis. Our man back in Rio recommended that we head down there. He said it's a fantastic place. He said a lot of wealthy Brazilians like to go there. And he said if you're lucky, you might see penguins, which is a bit bizarre because you don't really associate Brazil with penguins. But yeah, we believed him. Why not? Never seen a penguin before in the wild. So hey ho, anything can happen. The trip down to Florianopolis was interesting for a couple of things. Number one was the fact there's a couple of German places down in the south coast there of Brazil. We stopped in Blumenau for, I think it was about half an hour whilst we had a little stop. And yeah, the architecture, just think Bavaria, but in Brazil. Kid you not. Surprise, surprise, it's an area well known for its beer. Who would have guessed? But it was literally like Bavaria in Brazil. Very strange. Very, very strange. And probably to do with an influx of Germans after World War II, but apparently it went back into the 19th century as well. Now, we say Florianopolis, we didn't actually end up staying in Florianopolis itself, but that was where we needed to get to. We actually ended up in a place called Barra da Lagoa, excuse my Portuguese, which involved going into Florianopolis and then getting two more buses out to the lake, basically. This was probably the best hostel that we stayed at. We were following the initial recommendation from, let's say, the Airbnb guy in Brazil. Having gone on Hostel World, this was one of the most highly rated hostels in the area. So we stayed there for about 4 or 5 nights. We didn't know what to expect. We knew that from looking at the pictures, it was quite remote. There was a nice beach, a couple of supermarkets in the area, a bit of walking that we could do, but overall, not a ridiculous amount to see and do, but not something nice to sort of relax your muscles for a little bit. Checked in, and the beach was absolutely brilliant. We'd still got these hacky sacks from 2011, so we'd taken them round. We'd also got a couple of not paddle boards, but it's almost like a ping pong set as such. You just keep hitting the ball to each other, and that's what we like to do in our spare time. How big a rally can we get? How can we test? How can we test each other? All that sort of stuff. The hostel was cool. There was a couple of days where it absolutely lashed it down. It was chaos. Pretty much you weren't going to go anywhere at all. But on the days where it was good, one day we went into Florianopolis itself. It's just as you'd expect, I would imagine. Very colonial style town, especially in the centro area. So you could see, the Portuguese influence in the buildings. And again, as with most of Brazil, the street food is amazing. I think it's a pão de queijo. I think your coxinas, your quibes, your other bits and bobs. The food's good. The street food's good. The people are varied. You got colonial architecture. You got, a lot of street drinking as well. When I mean street drinking, I'm not talking alcoholic beverages. You're talking, your acai berries, I think they are. All your fruit juices, all of these sorts of things. A very relaxed way of life. It's absolutely fantastic. We were certainly getting used to it at this time. Florianopolis itself was all right. The other days in Barra da Lagoa, we were hanging out with this Argentinian lady and her American boyfriend. Started chatting with them for a little bit. We sampled mate for the first time, proper mate. So if you don't know what that is, it's almost like a herbal tea that goes into a special container. You put your bombilla or bombisha if you're Argentinian into the drink. You keep topping it up and you just share it around with friends. In effect, it is a way of life down there especially in Argentina, Uruguay, but also in the south of Brazil. We found it was quite a popular thing. Apparently, loads of football players nowadays rely heavily on their mate as well. So we experienced that. Apart from that, we just played around on the beach a lot of the time, and out of nowhere, when we were investigating the little river that runs right next to the town, believe it or not, kid you not, we saw penguins. Los pingüinos. There were actually penguins there. Beats me what type of penguins they were. Not able to remember that. But there were penguins. You're in Brazil. It's 23, 24 degrees. You're on the beach. And there's penguins just swimming around, happy as pigs in the proverbial, having a great time. Unbelievable stuff it was. Just crazy. And that's the first time that, we saw penguins in the wild. It was definitely an experience, to say the least. The only slight disappointment from this is being big football fans. One of the evenings when it was, the weather was horrific, the hostel people had put on a game of football. So, and most of us were having a few beers. Hostel was packed, we're having a few beers, we're having a laugh, watching this football. And we're looking at the team. We couldn't quite figure out where this team was playing. We're not sure where this team was playing at all. Turns out after the game, once we'd Googled it, it turns out they played in Florianopolis. So gutted. We could have gone to see another Brazilian league match in the butt end of nowhere, but it wasn't to be. We completely recharged our batteries. Now we knew that Foz do Iguacu was calling. Therefore, we departed Florianopolis, headed over to Foz do Iguacu. Something to bear in mind that with all these trips, unless stated, these are all by bus. The bus network in Latin America is very, very good. It varies from country to country. Spoiler alert, Mexico's probably got the best bus system out of the lot. But the buses are relatively inexpensive, they're relatively safe, and they're relatively comfortable. Can't really ask for much more than that. Now, Foz do Iguacu is a cool place. There are many ways that you can do it, and it actually depends on the country in which you're doing it from. It's a massive set of falls. You can see it from the Brazilian side, which is quite popular, or you can see it from the Argentinian side, which, surprise, surprise, is also quite popular. From memory, with the Argentinian side, you can go a lot lower. You can actually take a boat onto the Igwasi River itself and look up at all the waterfalls around you, whereas on the Brazilian side, you are pretty much looking down on the falls. So that is the key difference between the two. We've spoken to people that had done the Argentinian side, and they said it was fantastic. We've spoken to people that had done the Brazilian side, and they said it was fantastic. And we just decided that as we're going to be in Brazil, we might as well just, do it from the Brazilian side. So that's what we decided to do. Foz is an interesting place. Reason for that is if you look at one side over the Paraná River, you will see Ciudad del Este, which is in Paraguay. We knew that we were going over there in a few days anyway, so you can see one side of the river, you can see Paraguay, and you know that at the southernmost part of Foz itself, you would have the Igwasi River, you would have the falls, and then you'd basically be looking into Argentina. So it was a very almost interesting place. Foz itself is, as a place, not really a lot to talk about in Foz itself, but a couple of things happened there that need to be shared. Number one, we don't always get into the habit of overeating, and apologies to vegetarians and vegans here, but going to a rodizio in Brazil is a delightful experience. You walk in, you sit down at a table, and you got waiters. I forgot the word, but you got waiters that literally come around and will just serve you meat. They'll put it on your plate. You're talking, you got your chicken, your sausages, fillets of beef, you name it. These things are on big fat skewers. They come round, put the meat on your plate, and you just keep going and keep going and keep going. You've got a salad bar normally in the middle, and you normally have a dessert bar there. You turn up, you pay your price, and in Brazil anyway, you can just sit there as long as you want. So we turned up, we'd done a bit of mathematics, we figured out that going to a rodizio would be about £8 per head. Well, that's decent value. So we got in there, sat down, started off with a bit of salad, a couple of glasses of water. 3 hours later, we decided to leave. Now, our hostel at the time was about 4 or 5 blocks away from where we'd gone, this rodizio. And it took an hour and a half to walk home. We'd eaten that much that it was incredibly painful to walk. So much so that every block we had to sit down and have a breather for 10, 15 minutes. It was, look back on it, kind of laugh and go, that's a bit daft, isn't it? The quality of the food was bonkers. The value for money, incredible. And yes, incredibly gluttonous. But if you've ever been in that situation before, where you've overeaten, you've done these things, took about an hour and a bit to get back. 5 blocks, and not big blocks either. Onto the falls themselves. So we booked a semi-guided tour that included getting a bus down to the falls, having a walk around like a museum, having a bit of information about the falls. I got down there, and you get off the bus, and you can hear the noise. You don't know exactly where it's coming from, but you can hear the noise. It is scintillating. That noise is scintillating. It's almost deafening. You walk down these paths. You know it's there. You're going up and down, a couple of minor hills, and then out of nowhere, it just opens up. You're at the Igwasi River. You can see these falls all the way around. It's a remarkable thing to see, but also it's a remarkable thing to hear. We just followed the guided path, which is what most people were doing. We followed the guided path. We went straight down, pretty much into the river. So the falls went down, leveled out for a little bit, and then went down again. So we weren't at the very bottom, we were right in the middle, and you could walk across this wooden platform into the middle. It's called the Devil's Throat, and with good reason. You walk down into it. I mean, you're surrounded by water, so you're getting sprayed left, right, and centre, quite literally. The noise is deafening, as I said. It's like listening to permanent, massive rumbles of thunder. So you kind of lose your senses being, in and around the falls. You're sprayed with water from each side, so if you're going to go take a poncho at least, don't bother really too much about technology unless you've got waterproof technology, because it's just going to get absolutely soaking wet. You've got multiple rainbows, on each side because of the way that works. It's absolutely brilliant. And a lot of people have said when we were there, people that we'd met that had been to Niagara Falls up in, Canada, USA, people saying that hands down Foz is much better, just not as many people know about it, but hands down it is much, much better. There's no comparison. Foz is the best. We were at the falls for about an hour and a half, taking in the sights, just, the marvel of nature itself was incredible. There was a point, we didn't see it, but we were quite close to it. It's called the Marco das Tres Fronteiras. Yeah, Marco das Tres Fronteiras. So it's for 3 points. I mentioned before, one side of the river, you have Argentina. We're on the Brazilian side, and there's a point where the Igwasi River feeds into the Paraná River, and that's where you can see Paraguay. So there is a point where you can see all 3 countries from one vantage point. We didn't go to that particular place, but we were quite close. On the way back from the falls, there was a chance to go into a very big aviary. Loads of different birds, all this sort of stuff. We were talking with bird handlers. We were having macaws sit, or macaws, whatever you want to call them. They were perched on our arms. All of this sort of stuff, and that is pretty cool. Going around there, but we've gone in here, and we're slowly walking around, and we like to be respective. We like to show respect to wildlife, and this is where the toucan comes in. We like to show respect to wildlife. So if you can get a picture with a bird, happy days. That's always nice. No complaints. But you don't want to go running after them and scare them. It's pointless. There's absolutely no point in doing that. So about halfway around, out of nowhere, this toucan flies down, and it sits on the handrail. It's having a look round. It's been a bit shifty, but it's having a look round. It's not really scared of people, which is good. We like that. You like to be able to get as close as you can, respectfully to nature. So it's not scared of people. It's just sat there. It's looking around. It's looked at me. It's looked at Aaron. It's not really bothered. So we said, well, let's try and get a photo with the toucan. We don't need to touch it, just angle the photo properly. Let's get a photo of a toucan. Edging closer to the toucan. I've got my photo with the toucan. Toucan's then posed well for Aaron, so I've taken a photo of Aaron and the toucan. Still looking at us. It's a Mexican standoff. We're looking at the toucan's looking at us. And out of nowhere, this kid, a small kid, 6 or 7 years old, couldn't have been much more than that. He's with his parents. He's kind of barged through us to, as kids do, they get excited. They want to go and, touch and play with things. Kids kind of barged through us, taken us by surprise, and he's gone to play with the toucan, basically, disturb the toucan. So we've said, look, big family behind us, sod it, let's walk off. So we've slowly walked off. And this kid's made a move for the toucan, and the toucan's flown off. But what the toucan's done when it's flown off is basically taken a shit. And we heard the toucan fly off, and we've looked round, and this kid is covered in shit. He's absolutely covered in shit. It's in his hair. It's in his eye. The poor guy's got pink eye. He's got pink eye. So that it's taken a shit. It's in his hair. It's in his eye. It's dribbling down into his mouth. It's the kid started crying. His mum was trying to clean him up, and we had to walk away because we were crying. It was absolutely hilarious. And we said the same thing to each other. That's what you get sometimes if you try and mess around with nature. Show it some respect. So that kid, that kid would have learned a very, very difficult lesson that day. Just looking around and seeing, this kid with pink eye, and he's crying, and then because he's crying, his mouth's open and the shit's running into his mouth. It's absolutely vile. It's absolutely disgusting. Really, 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 really not good. It's funny as fuck. That was Foz do Iguacu. Our time in Brazil had come to a close. We knew that the following day we were going to attempt to go across the Friendship Bridge, the international friendship bridge between Brazil and Paraguay. We'd also been quite lucky because it might have been in Florianopolis, it might have been in Foz. We'd randomly gone on to a website called Soccerway, which gives you, football fixtures from, around the world, lets you know what's going on. And we had, in the midst of the World Cup being played, the primary club tournament in Latin America, which is the Copa Libertadores, that was reaching its conclusion. It's reaching its conclusion, and of all things, we saw that in the semi-finals, San Lorenzo had beaten whoever they'd beaten. They're from Argentina. But the other semi-final was between some unknown team that I'm not able to remember, but a team called Nacional, who played in Paraguay, who played in Asunción. So us being us, this is what swayed us to head over to Paraguay. Could Nacional win in their semi-final? And could we be in Asunción for the first leg of the final between Nacional and, San Lorenzo? Could we be there? We could actually be there. Now, that's a coincidence. That'd be cool. I think Nacional had won the first leg, so the chances were that it was likely they were going to progress. But we were keeping an eye on it, and that's why we decided to head from Foz do Iguaçu into Asunción. But rather than head straight there, we decided to stop off in Ciudad del Este, which, as we found out, is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So join us next time, where we might make it to a Copa Libertadores final in Asunción, and we also might make it, that's if we were to make it, out of Ciudad del Este. Join us next time for Paraguay. Till next time, hasta luego.